Good morning and happy Friday. So glad you all are here. My name is Phyllis Newbill. I'm the Associate Director of Youth and Community Education in one of several centers within ICAT. A few housekeeping things before we get started this morning. We are streaming, as always, so what we're doing and saying here exists on the internet and will exist afterwards, and I feel like you all should know that. There are muffins and pastries and coffee and tea, so please enjoy those. If you're online this morning, good morning. We're glad you're joining us. I'm sorry we don't have coffee for you, but I hope you have somewhere you are. I'm going to send this clipboard around in the room. The way we can justify our coffee and muffins is by having people sign in, so please do that. If you're a Virginia Tech faculty and PDN credit is helpful to you, make sure you sign up on the Canvas site. There's a QR code on the clipboard, so that gets you signed up. Sign up for today's Playdate, and then just make eye contact with me at some point, and I can give you credit for that. So when you have questions, wait for us to get to you with the microphone so our friends online can hear us. If you're online, if you have questions, use that button, and we will be watching the spreadsheet and there's actually already a question in the spreadsheet this morning, so we're ready. In the way of announcements, tomorrow is the Virginia Tech Science Festival, so we will be at the Center for the Arts and Newman Library on the 4th floor. We have about a little over 60 exhibits. There'll be a few thousand people here. There will be a number of school groups, about 400 folks in our school groups will be here. Everyone is welcome. It's a free-for-all. It's a great day. You don't have to be a kid or have a kid to come, but it'll be a great day. So come on over for that. It's from 10 to 3, and let me know if you have questions about that. I think those are all of my announcements this morning. Okay, this morning we have Jae-Young Ha, and we're going to talk about flood risk communication. I'm so glad you're here. I'll let you take it away.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining my presentation. And my name is Jae-Young Ha. I'm Assistant Professor of Landscape Architecture Program. And we have 3 co-PIs, and Nicholas Poli, who is the Director of the Visual Computing, who is sitting on there. And then we have another 2 co-PI, David Samples, and a Professor of Biological System Engineering. He is a Virginia Beach Extension, so he cannot attend this presentation. And then Terry Clement, who is the chairman of the Landscape Architecture Program. She also has a class in this morning, so unfortunately she cannot come. And we have also other collaborator, City of Roanoke Stormwater Utility Department, and then Hill Design Studio, which is a landscape architecture and urban planning firm. And then we have 5 research assistants, and unfortunately they all graduate this May. But the one of my RA, West Shores, and who is coming here because he is working in the Roanoke. And so today I'm speaking about how immersive virtual reality technology can help flooding risk communication for the community. And I start this research from my teaching courses. And in 2023, I teach the course Graduate Resilience Studio courses. In my class, and students are investigating how green infrastructure can mitigate those flooding issues. And during studio, we realized that flooding issues are really quite serious in downtown Roanoke. And so after studio, I'm just curious about how community perceive flooding and how we can have better risk communication platform for those community. So I think that there were many flooding issues this summer here and there. And I was traveling in New York in this summer in Manhattan, and there are flooding issues. And all subway was filled with the water, and this is my first experience encountering actual flooding in the US. And so due to the unpredictable weather condition, flooding becomes more frequent than ever in Virginia, and actually there are higher flooding risk. And many municipal governments, cities, and federal agency, they're really working hard to predict those flooding risk. But the actual flooding is always higher than what they expected. So Virginia, Commonwealth, and to mitigate those flooding risks, and they developed their own platform system, which is so-called VFRIS, Virginia Flood Risk Information System. This system actually identifies flooding impact area near your neighborhood area. And so when you access the VFRIS system, you can see the projections of the floodings. And for example, Virginia Tech campus lies within the 100-year flooding and 500-year flooding. And you can actually identify areas of flood impacted area. But the problem is that this is a two-dimensional information. If you're really not knowledgeable about seeing this two-dimensional information, it is really hard for you to understand to extent to which flooding impacted area it would be in your neighbor, in your community. So to better prepare for the future flooding issues, and I think flooding communication plays significant role in protecting our lives and property of the communities. And so why flooding risk communication matters? And flooding is a shared community issues, not just engineering problem. Community will be the one who will face these challenges. So without really proper community, proper like risk communication, it is really hard for us to have like proper risk management. And then second, flooding risk feels very distant. It is really hard to grasp because most of flooding is not really happening easily, right? And once a year or maybe twice a year, you probably encounter those flooding. So without really great visualization, it is really hard to grasp what it would be in your neighborhood. So our research team tried to answer the question, how can virtual reality technology really enhance risk communication for communities by increasing risk perception? So our study area is downtown Roanoke, and I'm sure most of you here have visited downtown at least once, right? And downtown has experienced several large-scale and small-scale flooding over 4 decades. And when you look at these images, and this is flooding maps, and then near Market Square Plaza, which is core of downtown area, lies within the 100-year and 500-year flooding. But as you can see here, there is no water bodies, and this is not riverine flooding. It's a flash flooding when high intensity rain comes, and actually there are flooding suddenly happens. So it is really hard to predict it. And so our research team created flooding simulations. This is the development procedure. And step one is we did like a hydrological modeling and using PCS1 model. And using geospatial data, meteorological data, we predicted like 5 different year of flooding in this town area. And then after that, step 2 is like all digital twin model of a city was automatically generated using city engine model. But obviously those model was not really accurate. We did like a minor editing using the SketchUps. And then all these like building, facade, materials, and textures were added in the SketchUp. And then after that, all this water model and hydrologic model was overlaid onto this digital twin model. And then all models were assembled and rendered using the Blender for making flooding simulation. So this is our base model. And as you can see here, all urban infrastructure, including like a load, buildings and site furnishings and tree canopies accurately presented. So compared to this like Google Street View, and as you can see here, this model is pretty much really accurate, and it accurately reflects like a real world urban environment. So this project especially, we didn't really think about the like importance of like looking good visualization. We really want to have like make precise and accurate model that actually we can predict like a future of flooding predictions in this downtown Roanoke area. So we have like 3 different flooding scenarios from 5-year flooding and 25-year flooding and 100-year flooding. When you look at the on the top, on the left corner, there is a small mark which is a label of the different year of flooding, so that we can actually know what participant actually really see the different level of flooding, but the participant cannot really see what year of level flooding they actually have seen during the workshop. So this is one of the demonstration of our simulations. And so adding the rain effect and the sound effect, and then it can have a more emergence and having a more realistic view of flooding. But we have like some stationary positions, and so the participant cannot navigate into this urban area because we want to actually control the environment exposure for the workshop. And so we conducted community engagement workshop. We have in total 6 workshops with the 25 participants, and from March to May in 2025, this is spring. And so we have a wide range of the communities, including residents and workers, and then city officials and engineers. And then it takes like 1 hour long sessions. And this is the entire workup procedure for our workshop. And then we started with a brief overview of the flooding issues, because if we give a brief information for the participant, and then maybe they have more better like discussions with the each community member. So each participant, each groups have seen like flooding simulations in either 2 different modality. One is like mobile-based flooding simulation, and the other modality is VR-based like simulation. And we have a different sequence because we try to minimize the ordering effect. And so that, for example, one participant group started with the mobile-based VR simulation, and then the other group started with VR-based flooding simulation. So the other modalities comes after. So after seeing those like flooding simulations, there are 3 different scenarios: 5-year, 25-year, 100-year flooding scenario. They conduct like height estimation tasks. We ask them to measure and evaluate the water depths of each different scene. And then we also ask about their risk perception. And so once they finish like a first like a round of those survey and then task, and they also continue same things in the different modalities. And then we also ask about the demographic questionnaires, and then we have a 30 minutes like discussion, and after that ending this workshop procedure. So we assess risk perception in 4 different dimensions, which is from the literature review. And then we ask about the worries and concern about the future flooding after watching this flooding simulation. And then second thing is like a psychological distance. And psychological distance describe how far away from future flooding it seems to be in your neighbors. And then third is awareness of the flooding. And fourth is preparedness. And are you willing to prepare or take action for future flooding? That's what we ask about the risk perception. And so we collect both quantitative and qualitative data. For quantitative data, we ask questionnaires using the 5 Likert scale survey. And then we ask them to height estimation task about the different level of flooding, and then perform very basic statistical analysis. And then for qualitative data, all discussions are recorded. After that, we transcribe it, and then for qualitative analysis. So these are basic demographic informations, and we have a half for men and male for participating in this workshop. And then race is white dominant, and considering geographic demographic in Southern Virginia, I think it makes sense. And then we have 60% of people are single, and then 75% majority are employed. And then we have a wide range of the income level of participant. And then I also ask about what is role in downtown. And then many people has different role as a consumer, visitors, or workers, or city officials, and restaurant owners, and there are many different wide range of the community groups. So firstly, we ask about their past experience of flooding, and then they mentioned that 88% of people have experienced flooding. And what's surprising is 60% of people mentions that they encounter very severe level or severe level of flooding. So Roanoke definitely has like more intensities, and the high intensity and high frequency of flooding happens recent days. And so in discussions, and then many participants mentions that they have very strong place-based memory. So one participant mentions about the Caroline Hospital, one participant mentions about the Greenway near their neighborhood, and one participant mentions about downtown, and they have very strong recall of the local flood area. And then the other thing that they mentions about is a range of severity, and so they have a different range of the severity of the flooding experiences, from very minor to the very serious that actually affect their even property damages. And so second questions, we ask about their worries and concern about the future flooding after watching this simulation. And 28% people mentions that high or very high level of the worry and concern about future flooding. And then they have three different categories that they concern about the future flooding. The first is like property damages. They're really concerned about their physical damages of their properties. And one participant mentions that physical damages, I think what I'm most concerned about, and losing our house, like where it gets damaged so badly. So they're really concerned about the property damages for sure. And the second is life and then safety risk, and they really feel about the life-threatening issues, and it's also maybe related to their family issues as well. And one participant mentions that probably life lost, people separated, parents calling their kids, scrambling to get to them. And then lastly, this is a really surprising findings, because those two are actually more short-term, immediate effect for communities, but these are more long-term effect. So they concern about the health impact, and especially one participant mentions that health concerns, rooftop collecting water, mold in ceiling, actually causing our lungs or respiratory issues and diseases. So I think flooding is could be like property damages, life risk potential. Life risk could be like most like concerning part, but they also really think about this could be like long-term health effect as well. And then we ask about the psychological distance, and then 61% participant mentions that they feel that flooding could be like very close and somewhat close in near future. And then in the discussion, they mentions about the increasing frequency and intensity, and they mentions that the flooding becomes our part of like daily life, and then their intensity becomes more severe than ever. And one participant mentions that it feels like it happens pretty often as a regular occurrence, so it's kind of just like it will happen. And the other participant mentioned that I just expect here to be an issue at this point, increasing in either intensity or frequency. So they really feel that the more frequent and then high intensity of the floodings in the future. And then second is like they have very difference in the perceived risk, and this is really tied to your past memories of flooding. And ones who has like property damages caused by the flooding, they feel like it is more imminent. But the others, if you never experienced those flooding, maybe it could be also very far psychological distance. And then we also assess like awareness of the flooding, and 72% of participants mentions that they very strong aware of the local flooding issues when they are watching those flooding simulation. And then we ask about the actions and preparedness, and then after watching flooding simulation, and participant mentions that they are 59% participant and very strongly agree that they will need to take action for future flooding. So they have three different levels of the preparedness mentions in the discussion. And first one is a personal preparedness, and then they think like we need to prepare future flooding at personal level. And one participant mentions that I'd definitely be interested in setting up flood barriers, digging sand. And then the other participant mentions that every person has this mobile flood wall thing because they flooded down here. So I think that they have various like creative solutions at the personal level. And then second is like community level. And then they especially emphasize the use of local communication channel, both online platform and offline platform. One participant mentioned that farmers market, their website, newsletter, and also they mentions about the Facebook web pages of the business owner. That could be definitely help. And then lastly, they mentions about the systems and the government efforts. And I know the Roanoke Stormwater Utility Department is really working hard to mitigate those flooding issues using great infrastructure and green infrastructure. But their system, our system, is not really as effective as they thought. And so one participant mentions that I don't think that they have good system of letting people know that something going to happen. Roanoke is really lacking in that area. So I think maybe disseminations and alarming those like floodings could be really critical for preparing flooding issues in Roanoke. And then lastly, we ask about the effectiveness of the flooding simulation, and then 76% participant mentions that very strongly agree with the effectiveness of the VR flooding simulation. And then in the discussion, they mentions that it has like a very great sense of reality and immersion. Especially one participant mentions that they really like a VR simulation since they can actually offer a very safe way and to experience flooding without any risk. So it's like without any taking risk, and we can see how those future flooding may be projected in their communities. And the second, they mentioned about the enhanced realism through the sensory features and using the three-dimensional images and then auditory sound. And then they can actually definitely really help them to understand how flooding it might be. And the second, it can have like a more better understanding flooding. And so it can improve awareness of impact area, severe level. And one participant mentioned that it's a lot easier to see how severe it is when you're in it. And then another participant mentioned that understanding flood heights helpful to have a visual and look around. And so we also conduct like a water estimation test in 3 different flooding level. And when you look at this table, and we assess like actual water depths in 3 different level of flooding. And then they also participant measure and estimate this like water depths and in mobile-based flooding simulation and then VR-based flooding simulation. When you look at the left figures, and then it says like perceived water depths in 3 different flooding scenarios in both like a mobile-based and VR-based. The color, the blue is mobile-based, and then orange color is a VR-based perceived water depths. And as you can see, the like mobile-based flooding simulation perception of the water depths is higher than the VR modality. And then right figures actually illustrated height estimation error, which is also known as like actual water depths minus perceived water depths. So its absolute value, it close to 0 means like they have more accurate perception of the water depths in the flooding. And if it goes numbers up, and which means that it has like more errors. So between 2 different modalities, it's not that really different, but what I found here is people underestimated water depths of flooding. So as you can see these figures, and on average, almost like 1 feet difference between actual water depths and then their perception. So they really underestimated those like a water level. So we need to actually train them to have like accurate perceive those water in flooding. And then lastly, we have like comparison of risk perception between mobile-based and VR-based flooding simulation. And then 3 categories has a statistical significance, and then VR has more effective in risk communications regarding worries and then actions and preparedness for future flooding. And then they thought that VR is more effective in understanding those floodings. So these are my last slide, and then there are key takeaways from this study. And this research revealed that visualization of flooding really effective in risk communication, especially by understanding and their flooding perception and risk perception. And then first takeaway is flooding is viewed as imminent and personal. And after watching this flooding simulation, they feel that flooding is quite close as our part of daily life. And then it could be like very personal because it anyway really attached to your past memories. If you have experienced of flooding, definitely this could be like a more serious issues. And then VR actually really strengthens your engagement and preparedness. So because this is a more realistic simulation, it is more easy to understand. And so they think that they need to more willing to actually prepare for future flooding. So I think that this could be a really good risk communication tool as like a professional engineer or public sector. And then third is there is a gap between perception and reality. And then especially when we take like water height estimation test, and then many people actually underestimate the depths of the water. And then we have a limitation about our study. And first, we have very few sample size, and we have very limited time, and then limited resources and limited like devices. So I think if we have like a more generalizable result, then we need to expand our sample size in the future. And then this study only conducted like commercial area. Obviously, many people living in residential area. So I think a residential area might be really need to be considered for this study as well. And lastly, comparison with traditional risk communication platforms, such as like two-dimensional maps, we didn't actually compare with that. So we need to actually check and identify how virtual reality technology over this like traditional platform. So this is our sponsor and collaborator. We really appreciate that they help us to make this research work and happens. And this is our last pages, and then this is flooding simulation demonstration. So if you have a smartphone, you can scan the QR code, and then you can double tap, and then you can see the like a different level of flooding. And but like Apple devices has some errors, and maybe I think Android maybe works better in this platform. But normally we actually use this simulation using the VR. It perfectly works in that platform. Okay, so thank you so much, and thank you for being here. And then if you have any questions, and please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you so much. What questions do we have in the room? We've got a couple online, but we can start in the room. I'll come to you.
Thanks, Jae-young. So my question is, you talked a lot about, and you talked with the community about the flooding risks and demonstrated that. Did you talk or have any conversations about mitigation practices or anything like that to kind of, that's the doom side of it, like to get away from kind of the doom and gloom of flooding?
So you mean the like we talk about the mitigation plan?
Yeah, like what mitigation, remediation can happen to prevent that?
We actually briefly talk about that, and briefly talk about the why flooding happens in downtown area, but we didn't really specifically mention about the what mitigation effort by the city, because we just want to hear about their community's thoughts. We ask about the like what kind of preparedness we will do in the future, and maybe if we talk about that, maybe that could influence our discussion. So yeah, we didn't really provide that much information, very briefly information for facilitating our discussion. Yeah, thank you. Okay.
Thank you so much. I have a question about like the estimation of the water height, like the perception. You asked this question like during experiencing the VR, right? But did you consider like doing this estimation in reality first? Because actually like the estimation of the water height in reality kind of like there is an error. So we could compare like this estimation real life versus in VR. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, can you elaborate more about the question? I just cannot hear your last part.
Yeah, so like you were asking about the perception of the water height during experiencing the VR, right? But did you consider like doing this like perception of the water height in reality? Like for example, like put a tub of water and ask the user to estimate the height, and then measure like the height already and do like this, so you would know if it is like due the VR experience or their own like bias of the
Oh yeah, we definitely didn't really test about that, because you know we don't have any really resources about that. But I think that's a really great idea, because most people are not really trained to see what water depth looks like, right? And I haven't ever done that before. So I think maybe that could be like our future research we need to consider about that. And we only actually do the like perform here in the virtual platforms rather than real platform. But their perception between real platform, real world, and then virtual platform might be really significantly different, I believe. So thank you for that suggestion as well. Yeah.
We have a couple questions online. Hi, Carl, and also Michael. They're both interested in how you created the model, the 3D model. Let me see. How you created the digital twin of the subject area, what technologies, how long it took. And also, Carl asks how much additional effort goes into creating the accurate 3D model beyond the effort of creating the hydrologic model, he says it feels like this should be required viewing for city administrators everywhere, but it seems like the difficulty of creating the VR model would make it hard for most communities to get their hands on a simulation like this.
I
That's a
think
lot.
that this question may be answered by Nicholas, and he's really helping for making this visualization.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, it's a great question. One of the things that we've been working on in advanced research computing since we were starting 3D Blacksburg and Strubles Creek work are these pipelines and workflows. So we're using open source GIS tools, things like Blender, to basically register the different coordinate systems and vertical datum, as well as add these texturing and other kinds of rendering elements. So it is all from public data, although I have to say that Jae-Young had a fantastic student who really did study the location and did a lot of hand modeling for that. But it was really crucial that besides the kind of visual plausibility, that we had registered the data to that model so that there is actually accuracy and precision in that water level relative to a bench or something that they might recognize. So there are automated ways to do it, open source ways. There are also, I think, specialized tools that can be used for that work as well. But we're happy to talk to anyone who's interested in that kind of workflow. Thanks.
We are at time, or a little past actually, so I want to thank everybody for being here this morning, and thank you for sharing, both of you, for sharing all of the work that you've done. We will be back here next week with more pastries and coffee and more mind-blowing presentations. See you tomorrow at the Science Festival, and I hope everybody has a great weekend. Thanks again.
Thank you so much.